the Justice Department kind of symbolically announces terrorism charges against senior Hamas leaders, including multiple who have already been taken out. But again, this is a couple months before an election. They're seeing Israel start to shift in terms of topics. Obviously, we saw the horrible murder of 6 more hostages over the weekend, including an American, maybe the most prominent American. And when those moments happen, I hate to be the person to cry politics, but it just feels that way. Professor Hutchinson, you're joining us in studio. I want to get your take.
Well, I think your analysis is spot on. Keep in mind that the DOJ filed these charges in February of this year. They unsealed the indictment 2 months before a national election. So what the DOJ is trying to do, what the White House is trying to do, what the Biden-Harris administration is trying to do is to show that they are tough when it's precisely the opposite of the truth. Israel will indeed go after these terrorists, and in fact has already done so, but the United States has been reluctant to do so, in part because the United States still blames Israel, at least in part, for the October 7th attack. So we have a situation where a terrorist group attacks Israel, and then we put the blame on the United States, and that approach is quite consistent with the Democrats' left-wing base. So essentially, Israel is blamed when it is attacked.
Yeah, absolutely, Will. And I think we want to play a clip from Merrick Garland. You can set that up.
That's right. So when this indictment was unsealed yesterday, Merrick Garland gave a press statement. It was on video, and so we're going to play a little bit of that here. But when you hear the things he's saying, it's things that we've been criticizing the administration about ever since they stepped foot in office. And it's almost as if he's describing the self-fulfilling prophecy of when you are tough versus weak on Iran, Hamas, and Islamic terror. Let's go ahead and play bite one.
Today, the Justice Department unsealed charges against Yahya Sinwar and other senior leaders of Hamas for financing and directing a decades-long campaign to murder American citizens and endanger the security of the United States. As outlined in our complaint, those defendants, armed with weapons, political support, and funding from the government of Iran and support from Hezbollah, have led Hamas's efforts to destroy the state of Israel and murder civilians in support of that aim.
When you hear that from the Attorney General, the funding from Iran, the material support from Hezbollah, and also the fact that they've had a decades-long campaign, Professor Hutchinson, these are the things that we've been talking about here at the ACLJ for decades as well, about the Pay for Slay campaign, where Americans ended up being killed, such as the Taylor Force Act came out of this. Taylor Force was a Vanderbilt grad student that was killed in Israel by a Hamas terrorist. And what happens after that? These Hamas terrorists get rewarded financially by the government. Whether they're killed, then it goes to their family. If they're in prison, the money goes to their family. There is a bounty on killing Israelis and Americans if you're Hamas. And we've been begging the government to do something about this for decades. Fortunately, you saw good measures happen during the Trump administration. The Taylor Force Act, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, the Abraham Accords, all things that would isolate Iran and strengthen the security of Israel. And then you see the Biden administration step in and undo many of those things, weaken our relationship with Israel, weaken Israel's relationship with the Gulf states. And you see what happens? October 7th happens. Now you see Merrick Garland listing off the issues that we have been criticizing this administration for enabling. And they're trying to, 2 months before the election, appear strong against Hamas.
I think you're precisely correct. And this particular indictment is really symbolic, but more importantly, it's really political. And it's all about appearances. Keep in mind that the United States government, directly or indirectly, under the Biden-Harris administration, has funded terrorist organizations. keep in mind that the UN relief organization, individuals who work for that organization have been essentially working with Hamas in Gaza. Also keep in mind that the United States government has been funding Iran. And it doesn't seem like the Biden-Harris administration is prepared to stop because they are in desperate pursuit of what? A so-called Iran nuclear deal. And then Iran basically sends funds to terrorist organizations in Lebanon and in Gaza. And so I think at the end of the day, what we have from Merrick Garland is simply lip service. Also, one last point, we should keep in mind that the new Labour government in Great Britain has withdrawn licenses allowing the sale of British military equipment to Israel. So essentially, the West is blaming Israel for being attacked.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a call coming in that I think ties in perfectly. Michael is calling from Florida, listening on Sirius XM. Michael, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My point is this. I mean, Trump said that this would never happen had he been president of the United States. But let's just, for instance, take into account that somehow we did end up in this situation and Trump was our president. What do you think how his support for Israel would be right now?
I'll say this. If you go back to anything with President Trump, and you may be a supporter, you may not be a supporter, it doesn't matter. If you go historically, look at the success that was happening in the Middle East, whether it was through the Abraham Accords, which was bringing the Middle East together for me the first time in my lifetime. You probably can find clips of me being very emotional on air about it because I never thought I would see it. I never thought I'd see where there was relative peace in the Middle East, where you could freely travel if you were Israeli, where, in the UAE, they had Hanukkah celebrations, where all of these things were happening. Big moves were happening. Jerusalem becoming being certified as the capital. All these were happening under President Trump. So take what you want or not from his administration, whether you liked it or not. If you want to say that we were safer then, I would say that there's almost no denying it. So whether it would happen or not, I don't think it would have happened because I think the response would have been extreme from the United States if you had President Trump in office. This war probably would not still be going on, by the way, even if it did happen, because I think the U.S. would have actually shown its true support and would actually have stood up to what was going on in Hamas and realizing we need to get behind Israel in a way that we could. And that's not about endless wars and promoting these sort of, proxy wars that I feel like is what's happened in the current administration where, you're supporting Ukraine, but are you really? Well, we're going to do funds. We're not going to send troops. We're not going to do this. I don't think that would have happened under a President Trump.
I don't believe it would either. And once again, you saw Iran in a box during the Trump administration, something that they had been able to run wildly against American interests during the Obama administration. And then when the Biden administration got into office, a lot of those policies from the Obama administration were then revived under the Biden administration. And what happened? Iran, flush with cash, is able to continue their adventurism in the Middle East, which includes exporting terror.